Hey there guys, Mr. Lunai here, just stopping by to share another video lesson with you. So today I simply wanted to focus on a review. I know that you guys have been working very hard and taking mock exams and getting that taken care of. And I know that you have a couple more exams here today, so I really do not want to bombard you with tasks. I just simply want you to sit down, relax, and go through this PowerPoint with me so that way you can review successfully this one chapter. It's been quite some time since we've been talking or since we've talked about it. The last time that we talked about this was literally right before we left on spring break. So let's go ahead and just review some of this information and let's get started. So when we talk about motivation, much of our behavior is driven internally by motivation. So motivations are just simply the need or desire that energize and direct behavior. So motivations are a result of brain activity that is influenced by nature and then nurture as well. Now, one example of primitive motivation is an instinct. An instinct is a complex unlearned behavior that is a rigid pattern throughout species. These are actions carried out due to neural impulses that are genetically coded. It does not involve consideration or thought. For example, beavers do not consciously think about building dams, they are compelled to do so by instinct. So when we talk about incentives, right, they're a bit less complex, but incentives are positive or negative stimuli that motivate behavior, and that can be used to motivate individuals as well. So one can use rewards to influence behavior, such as offering money, that's an extrinsic motivator, to a neighborhood kid to mow your lawn, or it can also be a stimuli driven, such as the smell of pizza motivating us to eat. And lastly, one can be driven internally to improve or accomplish a goal by intrinsic motivation or internal motivation, just motivation that's internal, that there's no need for incentive. So when we're talking about homeostasis, homeostasis is one of the primary factors that drives behavior, because we all, as a species, are trying to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis, remember, is just the maintenance of a steady internal state, which means that when we are adequately fed, hydrated, aroused, satiated, and engaging in meaningful work, we are in a state of homeostasis, feeling satisfied and content. It may also refer to the maintenance of our body, such as our regulation of blood, sugar, and urination. So now one cannot permanently maintain homeostasis as we have many needs, fundamental biological and psychological requirements for physical and mental health. So some examples of needs are oxygen, food, water, rest, and a sense of security, procreation, social acceptance, and companionship. Without a steady supply or access to these essential needs, we are compelled to meet them. Now, the force that compels us to meet these needs are called drives. These are the physiological and psychological arousal that compels us to satisfy our needs. So the pain and discomfort of our drive, such as hunger, thirst, not being able to breathe, loneliness, it literally compels us to eat, drink, breathe, socialize, etc., and fulfill every single one of our needs. So talking about drives, these are some of the drive theories. There are several theories that attempt to explain these motivations, so let's go ahead and take a look at them. Drive reduction theory is the first one, and it's the idea that physiological needs create and arouse tension that motivates an organism to satisfy these needs. So, for example, the drive reduction theory just states that once you're out of water or you're just thirsty, right, you're going to take care of that need by taking a drive to reduce that need. Furthermore, the arousal theory holds that each person has a unique arousal level that is right for them. This means essentially that the amount of water, sleep, socializing, security, etc., one needs is individually determined largely by personality, body size, and other biological and psychological factors. So arousal theory, all it compilates is that we all have different levels of arousal or of excitement. So that's why some people just engage in playing chess for fun, and other people go bungee jumping. So let's go ahead and take care of hunger drives. Now biologically, appetite itself is caused by the interaction of the hormone ghrelin and the hypothalamus. This was primarily discovered in rats with damage to the hypothalamus, as scientists noted that damage caused over-interest in food or a complete lack of interest. So physiologically, we have to battle the availability of calorie-dense and nutrient-rich foods that taste delicious and activate our reward centers. Now, environmentally, As social creatures, we also tend to eat more in groups. If you notice, most gatherings center around food or involve it. Additionally, when there is greater variety of food, we tend to eat beyond the point of satiation. We likely try to different types of food, which often leads to overeating, and this is known as the buffet effect. It is also believed that each person has their own weight set point, the point at which an individual's lean weight thermostat is set. If we fall below our set point, we are driven to eat. Research over the past 5 to 10 years has actually indicated that not only consistent way to change our set points is to gain or lose weight while not losing muscle mass. This means that weight loss or gain usually requires strength training if one plans to keep the weight on or off. Awesome. So, talking about sex drive, sex is deeply rooted in primitively instincts and drives that impact mostly inherited biological factors, but certainly can influence the environment or can be influenced by the environment. The sexual response cycle itself is a cycle of arousal and excitement, followed by plateau, orgasm, and resolution. So, biologically, the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, impact the rate and intensity of one's sex drive, with generally speaking, higher amounts raising sex drive in men and women respectively. Sex hormones drive are also increased with exercise, health, and emotional connections with the other person, although it is certainly not required. Now, men and women also tend to be driven to seek sexual partners differently. Men, in relation to the average woman, tend to prefer a higher amount of sexual partners. This is likely a mechanism developed and refined evolutionary, as men can have children with many different women simultaneously. Now, women, on the other hand, tend to prefer a smaller amount of high quality partners as opposed to high quantity. This is also likely a mechanism developed and refined evolutionary. As a prior to contemporary society, a pregnant female required a great deal of help or protection to ensure both the female and child would make it to term. Now, while neither drive is set in stone, and a sizable minority of sexes deviate from the averages, these tendencies certainly hold true across population averages, with research dating back as far as work of Alfred Kinsey in the mid 1920s or 20th century. Now, Kinsey studied habits, partners, practices, and played a leading role in making sex less taboo. Now, when we talk about socializing, we are also driven to socialize as a species. Our desire to be accepted and to thrive in groups is likely rooted evolutionary, as those driven to stay in groups had a much better chance of survival and reproduced at much higher rates. This meant that surviving and thriving was dependent on working with and being accepted by the group. So to be accepted meant safety, food, and more choice of mates. Being disliked or excluded meant alienation and decreased odds of living and procreation. This likely explained our biological drive for acceptance in groups, as those individuals that had this need and associated drive consistently passed on their genes. This also explains why it is physically, emotionally, and psychologically painful when one does not feel appreciated, accepted, or liked. Now, such needs were articulated hierarchically by the humanist Abraham Maslow in his hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow believed essentially that once our water, food, and security were secured, we gravitated to our acceptance needs. This is likely why we spend so much money and time on appearance and also alter behavior to be accepted by others, be it friends, family, or romantic partners. Now, social media has also layered on several complications by increasing overall social connection with those we know. While this is certainly a good thing on the surface, it has some negative aspects. For example, we tend to use social media to make idealized comparisons with others, exclude one another, gossip, and other malicious practice. As a result, rates of depression and anxiety in newer generations have skyrocketed, particularly girls and women. Researcher by Jonathan Haidt and Generation Z, those born after 1996, have shown increases in female diagnosis for depression and anxiety disorders, as well as hospital admittance for self-harm by 189%, or 61% increase for males. Now, this is the hierarchy of needs. We did talk about we first need to foremost take care of our very biological needs, our physiological needs, and then we move on towards the peak of the pyramid. And remember, not all people get to self-actualize. It's actually a very rare occasion where people get to self-actualize and just achieve their full potential. There are always many, many factors that prevent people from just climbing the hierarchy of needs. So first we have the physiological needs, safety needs, belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization. Now, when we talk about stress, right? Stress is essentially the perception and physiological response to certain events called stressors that we perceive as threatening or challenging. It is a state of anxiety that heightens our heartbeat, breathing, and blood pressure and can, if sustained frequently for a long period of time, have harmful health effects. Stressors are events that evoke or initiate a stress reaction. These are subjective to the individual, but all trigger the same anxiety-ridden response. The brain essentially sees the stressor as a threat and engages the sympathetic nervous system. This is essentially the fight or flight response meant to keep your body fully alert and able to deal with any threat. While this can be useful when an actual threat to your life is present, the constant heightened physiological state can be draining and taxing on your health. So some examples of stressors, you guys know this. So catastrophes, right? Significant life changes like divorce, death, public speaking, daily hassles like bills, jobs, commutes, essays and tests, social and work pressures, things of that nature. Now, the general adaptation syndrome, or GAS, this is the progression of stress, and it is universal in animals and humans. Now, the sequence of physiological response to stressor is known as general adaptation theory. The body's response to all stress. It takes place in three stages, and when prolonged, can be exhaustive and draining to the individual. The very first stage is called the alarm reaction stage. This is the stage in which the body prepares the body for fight or flight in response to the threat by heightening one's heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, and energy. Now, the next stage is called the resistance stage. In this stage, we attempt to return the body to its normal state. During this phase, the body's parasympathetic nervous system attempts to resist the impact of stressful stimulus. While blood sugar and blood pressure are still heightened, hormones return to homeostasis and focus on repair over alertness. The very final stage is called the exhaustion stage. In this stage, we have already failed to cope with the distressing stimulus, and the stressor continues to focus on the alertness and preparation of reacting to the stressor. So at this point, the body has wasted most of its focus and energy in reacting to stress, leaving the subject depleted and drained completely. So the alarm stage would be like kind of getting ready for a test. The resistance stage is actually getting through the test, and the exhaustion stage would be the very end of the test. So the impact of stress, right? While individual responses to stress may vary, there are some general tendencies that manifest themselves among the sexes. So men, for example, are more prone to socially withdraw and aggression when stressed, whereas women are more likely to tend to and befriend and seek support or outlet unload their emotions and thoughts onto others. So some individuals get trapped in a cycle of unending stress. This is known as general adaptation syndrome. Now, the prolonged period of stress and management to face a threat or threats that often leads to exhaustion or poor health. Most of the initial research on general adaptation syndrome has been done by Hans Seal, and as well as adverse effects. Some of the detrimental impacts on one's health can be hypertension, increased risk of heart disease, headaches, exhaustion, a depressed immune system, and delayed repair. So the immune system, believe it or not, stress does impact the immune system heavily. One of the more surprising adverse effects of the general adaptation syndrome is its impact on the immune system. When focusing the bulk to one's energy and other resources to alertness and focus on a stressor, it deprives the immune system of these resources. It actually leaves people not only more prone to illness, but it often takes them a lot longer to recover and perhaps less likely to recover at all. Now, additionally, thoughts and feelings can influence your immune system. The brain and one's physiology can be influenced by these thoughts, and that directly impact the endocrine hormones that affect your immune system. This processes of thoughts and feelings influence your immune system, and it's known as psychoneuroimmunology. The College Board wants students to understand the basic functions of the immune system. The body's defense against infection.